What's up everybody, welcome to a new multiplayer inventory video. In today's video we're going to take a look at setting up the item menu. So if we right click on an item we get this little drop down menu and we can do things like split stacks or drop items, and we're adding a use button in here later as well. So we can determine how many items we want to split from the stack or how many we want to drop, and then if we click the little button it will drop that amount, for example. So that's what we're going to do today. If you like the videos, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to get your hands on the project file, you can become a member of the YouTube channel. And then you will get access to some premium channels in the Discord. And there you will find the project files for this project as well. So thanks for listening to the intro, I guess. And we're going to dive into the video. So first of all, I want to mention one thing. It's not a fix or something, but just something I want to explain. So for the maximum stack size variable and how you can use it. So if you look at the add item to inventory function, for example, it will be a little bit clearer. So we have the maximum stack size integer for the items in the data table. And if we set that to -1, that means that the item cannot stack at all. So it's essentially the same as setting the item stack to 1. So -1 not stackable. Then if we set it to 0, that will actually mean you can stack it unlimited. So there's no limit to the stack size. And anything higher than 0 will actually define a maximum stack size. So that's how you can use that variable, just to make that clear. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go into the widgets folder and we're going to create a new widget for the item menu. So user interface widget blueprint and a user widget. So this is going to be the widget blueprint inventory item menu. And let's do the designer part first, because that's always the most fun. First of all, let's start with a size box. So we're gonna add the size box. I think that's somewhere in here maybe. There we go. So for the size box, I'm gonna set the width and the height override, and I'm gonna make it 395 by 260. So 395 by 260. And that should be good. So now we can grab ourselves a border and drop it on top of there. So I'm going to make this border my default color. So that's just a black or grayish border. So let's make it black and then a little bit transparent. There we go. On top of the border, we're going to grab ourselves a vertical box. There we go. And let's start with something like a title. So we're going to add the item name and a button to close it. So in here, we're going to grab a horizontal box first. And inside of the horizontal box, we're going to grab ourselves another border. So this border, I'm going to make it my green color. So let me see, that's going to be something like this. And then I want to set it to fill. So that should be over here. And then inside of the border, I'm going to drop some text. So this is going to be the text for the item name. So let's rename it first, text item name. And then for the item name, we want to center it. So over here, we're actually going to make sure that it's filled and then set the justification over here to center. So the text will be centered. And let me grab my font and stuff from another menu. So let's go over here and copy my font. So I can simply paste it over here and then grab the correct color. So I probably want to use another color over here. Let's make it something black, why not? There we go. So we have the item name over here. And then we want to add a little close button next to it. So I'm going to add a button inside of the horizontal box. And for this, I'm going to rename it. So that's my button close. And in here, I'm going to drop some text as well. And I'm just going to type an X in here. So we have a little square with an X in here. And then let's change the tint of the button as well. So that should be something green maybe. I'm not going to bother with the hovered style and things like that. We could add a little bit of padding maybe, so that will look a little bit better. So we have a close button. Let's make the text black over here as well. There we go. That should be good. Okay, now we can go to the next row. So we're going to add another horizontal box and drop it inside of the vertical box. And for this horizontal box, first we're going to grab an image, and the image we're going to use for the icon. So let's drag it in the horizontal box and call this our image icon. So that will make it a variable, that's fine. We could assign some image in here so we could see a little bit what's going on. So I'm going to select an image and then I'm going to resize it to 100 by 100. And let me grab my notes quickly. So for the alignment, I think we should be good to go. We have it set to auto, so that's fine. Okay, so we're going to keep it like this. We have the image icon, and then we're going to grab some text for the icon amount, item amount. So drop the text inside of the horizontal box as well. And this is the text item amount. So that should be a variable. And then we want to make sure that we have our correct font and stuff in here. So let's set that up and paste it. And since the background is black, let's make this text green. Why not? So we're going to give this a number. And then we need to change some alignments over here. So we're going to set it to fill for the text over here. And then we want to center it. So we have it centered horizontally and vertically. And then we're going to grab a button. And we're going to drop that inside of the horizontal box as well. And that's going to be the button to drop items. So a horizontal box with the icon and the item amount text. Let's drop the button in there. So that will make the button appear over here. Let's rename it first. And we're going to name this our button drop items. So drop. And let's do the alignment. So we want to align it vertically to the bottom. And then horizontally to the right, and make sure we have it set to fill. So that will push the item name text to the left. That should be good. Let's grab some text on top of our button, and this will simply say drop. So that doesn't need to be a variable. Let's drop it. And make sure we set up our fonts again, so we can copy and paste it. And make the text black, and then make our button green. There we go. Okay, again, I'm not going to bother with hovered and pressed styles. You can set it up the way you want to. Now we're going to add another horizontal box inside of our vertical box, so we can add another row. So drop it in the vertical box. And in here, we're going to add the buttons for incrementing and setting the amounts and things like that. So first we're going to grab a button. And this is going to be our button decrement. And on top of this button, we're going to drop some text. So I'm simply going to type in minus in here. And then let's set up the fonts and stuff like that. So that should be in here. Make the text black. And then make our button green again. So we have a minus button. Then we're going to add input. So we can actually type in the amount as well if we want to. So we're going to go to editable text. And let's drop it inside of the horizontal box over here. So this is going to be the input amount. And that's a variable, so we're good to go over there. And let's see for the alignment. We have it auto, and then, so that should be good. Well, we could change our color in here. So that should be our background color. background image normal. And I don't actually see that in here. Okay, I'm not going to really bother with it too much. As long as we have an input box over here, that should be good. And let's see, do we want to set anything up in here? So for the justification, we're going to set it to centered, and then we're going to set the minimal desired width to 80. And then if we compile it, that should make a change. So that's good to go. Now we actually might want to set up some background over here. So let's set the color and opacity. And if we deselect inherit, we should be able to change it, I think. No, that's not the correct color. Now this is a little bit annoying. So image selected, composing. Okay, let's go for the image selected then. And that's also not the one, so maybe it's this one. Oh, freaking really. Font outline settings, color and opacity. Okay, we're gonna skip the freaking color for now. Let's grab the decrement button and we're gonna duplicate it. So then we're gonna have an increment button at the other side of our input amount. So first let's make this increment. And we actually need to move it ourselves. So I'm gonna move the input amount in between the two buttons. And then I'm gonna change the text over here to make it plus. So we have minus and plus, and then we're also going to add one button to just select the entire stack. So I'm going to duplicate the increment button again and call this button all. And I'm just going to put a multiply symbol in here. I'm not sure what else to use here, but pick whatever you want. And then we also want to add a split stack button. So we're going to add that to the right so we can grab our drop button. And if we copy it and paste it inside of our horizontal box, that should work fine. Then we can rename this button. So that's going to be our split button. And then change the text as well. And that should be good. And then we have one final horizontal box to add. And we're going to add the item description in there. And we can actually, well, we're going to use a border for that. So we can give it a background color. So we're going to drop the border inside of the vertical box. And then make sure we have it set to fill. And give it a proper color. And then inside of that border, we can drop some text. And that's going to be the item description. So let's change it. Text item description. And we want that to be a variable and set up the fonts again. There we go. So this should pretty much be our item menu. Now we can add some padding over here to make things look a little bit better. So let's add 2 padding to the border. And we can also add some padding to the horizontal boxes. So if we select all 3 of those and set the padding to 2. So that will separate all of the buttons and things like that. So it will look a little bit cleaner. Okay, so we have the designer part done, I think. So we can dive into the graph and start setting things up. So let's open up our graph, and first we're going to create 2 functions that we're going to use to update the menu. So let's create a new function, and the first one is going to be update item menu. And we're going to need some variables as well, so let's just create those. First, let's create the item row name. So that's our name variable. Then we also want to add our item amount. That's an integer. And we need another integer to grab our inventory index. Inventory index. And then we need one last variable, and that's going to be boolean is world item. So is it an item in a container, for example, or is it an item in the player's inventory? So we have the variables in place. Then no, that's not entirely true, by the way. We also need references to some widgets. So we need our widget blueprint player inventory. So that's of the type player inventory, our widget blueprint. And we also need a reference to the inventory slot that we clicked on. So we're also going to grab our widget blueprint inventory slot. And that's of the type widget blueprint inventory slot. There we go. And for those variables, we actually want to enable instance editable and exposed on spawn. So if we create the widget, we can specify those. Then in the update item menu, we're going to drag in our inventory slot. And from the inventory slot, we're going to get the item row name. And then we can store that on here. So we have the correct item row name set up in our item menu. Then we're going to grab ourselves a table row. So get data table row. And we can plug in our item row name. And we're going to look inside of our pickup info table. So let's break the structure over here. And then we can start setting some things in the menu. So we're going to grab our text item name. And we probably forgot to make that a variable. So let's go back to the designer, text item name, and we actually didn't enable it. So set is variable over here, and then we should be good. So we can grab in our item name text and set the text. Plug it into the row found bin, and we can simply grab the pickup name from the data table. Then we also want to set the item description. So let's copy and paste it, and then text item description in here. Again, plug it in from the structure. And we're also going to set the icon. So let's drag in our image icon, and we're going to set a brush from texture. So set brush from texture. Plug it in, and then the texture is the HUD icon from the structure. So that's good as well. So we can update the menu with this function, and then we're also going to create a function for splitting stacks. So we're going to call this update split stack. Split stack. And we can actually call this without updating the rest of the menu. So after we clicked the little split stack button, for example, we do not actually need to update the entire menu. We only need to update the values. So that's what we're going to do inside of this function. So first let's grab a branch, and we're going to check if we are the world item or if we are a player item. And we want to make sure that we have the correct reference to our player inventory slot. So we're going to grab our player inventory, and over here from the player inventory, we can get all of the inventory slots for the world and for the player. So get all inventory slots world. Let's do this one first because that's the true pin. And from here we can get a copy, and we can actually get it from our inventory index. Plug it in over here. And then we want to store this inside of our widget blueprint inventory slot. So this way we know we have the correct updated values. And we're going to do the same thing for the false pin with the player slots. So drag off the inventory and get all inventory slots player. And again, we're going to get a copy from the inventory index and store that inside of our widget blueprint inventory slot. So that's good to go. Then from the inventory slot, we can grab our correct item amount. So we're going to drag in the inventory slot again, drag off here, get item amount. And we want to make sure that, well, first let's set it. So let's drag in a setter for the item amount and make sure that we override it. So that's good to go again. Then we're going to check if this is actually 0 or not. So let's compare it to 0, and let's grab a branch in here. So if this is true, then we dropped the entire stack, for example, or we split everything off and there's nothing left in here. So we're simply going to close our item menu. And we need to make that function, so we're going to do that a little bit later. So let's add a comment here, close menu. And that's what we want to do for the false pin. Then for the true pin, sorry. For the false pin, we're going to continue. So we're going to grab another branch in here. And again, we want to check if we are a world item on the inventory slot. So we're going to drag in our inventory slot. Drag off here, get is world item. Plug it into the condition, sorry. And then we're going to set our inventory contents and we're going to store those in a local variable. So let's create a local variable and that's our local inventory contents. So that's of our inventory content structure. Then we can grab our player inventory, and if we are a world item, we want to get the container that we're currently in. So we're going to get our opened container. That should be, we have the player inventory. Oh, we need to get our character first. So we're going to get our third person character. That's actually stored on the inventory widget, and from the character we can get our opened container. There we go. And from the opened container we can get the container contents. There we go. And then we can store those in the local variable. So this is for the true pin. And we need to make the local variable an array. So let's do that. First, let's change the variable type and then we can plug it in over here. And if we are not a world item, so we're from the player, we can actually grab the third person character from the player inventory widget and then grab the inventory from the player directly. And then we can store that inside of our local inventory contents. So plug this one in. There we go. So now that we have the inventory stored, we're going to grab a for each loop and we actually need one with break. So we're going to grab a for each loop with break. Not a for loop. There we go. So we want to loop through the inventory contents and we want to make sure that we have an empty spot so that we can actually split stacks. So that's what we're going to check in here. So we're simply going to break our array element and then we can compare our item row name. So if this is an empty slot, then we can actually split stacks. So we're going to grab this, plug it into the condition, and then we need a boolean. So that's going to be local found empty slot. And that's going to be a single bool. So we're going to set this one to true if we found an empty slot, and then we're going to break our loop. There we go. And then after that we need to add a branch to determine if we actually found an empty slot or not. So let's drag in our local variable. And we also want to make sure that our item amount is actually greater than 1, so we can actually split the stack. So we're going to grab an end boolean. And then grab our item amount and make sure that it's greater than 1. And that's going to be our condition over here. So if this is true, we can grab our button split. And in this case, we want to set it to be enabled. So set enabled and make sure we enable it. And if it's false, we're simply going to disable the button. So plug it in like this. So then we want to grab our input amount and we want to make sure that we set that to the correct amount as well. So if we have a value in there that's not valid anymore, we're going to take care of that. So we're going to grab our input amount over here. And in here we're going to set the text. So that's the text for the editable text. Just a sec. Excuse me, someone was at the door. So where were we at? We had the input amount text box, and we are going to update the split stack amount. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab our item amount and we're going to divide it by 2. So for example, if we have a stack of 10 items, then by default we're going to set the split amount to 5. So let's do that, and then we need to make sure that we clamp the result. So we're going to drag off the result and we're going to clamp an integer, and we're going to clamp the minimum to 1 and the maximum to the item amount, and then we can plug this into the text. And we can set up a few things over here, but that's not really interesting. We could disable grouping, but that means we have item stacks over 1,000 items, so probably not necessary. And then we also want to update our text for the item amount. So let's grab the normal item amount text, and we're going to set the text again. Plug it in over here, and again we're going to grab the item amount with a toText or an integer and plug everything in. So this will update the correct amounts after we split a stack, for example. So compile and save that, and then we're going to set up the event graph. So let's start with event construct. And in event construct we're going to grab our inventory slot, and from here we're going to get our inventory index. And we also want to get the boolean isWorldItem. So we can store those inside of our variables in here. So inventory index, and plug it in, and do the same thing for the world item and plug that one in. And then we can simply call our 2 functions. So first we're going to update the item menu, and then we're going to update the split stack. And that will set everything up. And now let's do the onClicks for the item amount buttons. So let's do button all. Let's add an onClicked event. And let's just do them one by one. So we have the item amount, and we're going to grab that from the variables. For this we're going to say toText. So toText integer, and we simply want to set that in the input amount. So we have our input amount text box, and we're going to drag off here and set the text. Plug it in over here. So if we click the all button, then it's simply going to put the item amount from the entire stack into that input amount box. Then we have button decrement. So let's do that one, button decrement. And what we want to do is grab the input amount that's currently in there. So we're going to grab the input amount text box, and from here we're going to get the text. So this will actually return a text. And we need to make sure that we turn it into an integer, but we can't do that directly. So first we need to go to a string. So text to string. And from a string we can go to an integer. String to integer, and then we can decrement it. So let's drag off here and subtract 1. Oh really? And then we can make sure we set that for the item amount, but we want to clamp it first. So let's drag off here, and we're going to clamp it as an integer. Make sure the minimum is 1 and the maximum is our item amount. And then we can simply update the input amount box. So let's grab a set text for that one, plug it in over here, and we can plug in the integer, and it will convert it back to a text for us. So after that we have the increment button. So let's add an onClicked over here as well, and we can do the same thing, but this time we're going to replace the minus for an add. So let's just copy everything over here. And let's get rid of this node, and we're going to add one to it. So let's add one and clamp it. Oh, there we go. And then we have the actual input amount as well left. So let's go to the input amount, and for this we're going to change the onText committed. So that's the lower one. And we can simply grab this text, and we want to turn it into an integer again. So we can grab these nodes over here and plug them in. So we have an integer to work with, and we're going to clamp it. So let's grab the clamp and the item amount, so we cannot exceed our maximum stack size. And then we're simply going to set it into the input amount text box again. So I noticed we forgot the actual text box over here. And then we can copy this and paste it. So this way, if we type in a value that's actually greater than our stack size, it will clamp it, so we cannot exceed it. That's good to go as well. And then after all these buttons, we want to grab a branch. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our input amount from the text box. So we're going to get the text from here. And we want to make this an integer again. So let's grab these nodes and let's paste them over here. So if this actually is the same as our item amount, so let's compare it equal to our item amount, then we cannot split the stack, because that doesn't make sense. So we're going to plug this into the condition, and we're going to grab our button split and simply set enabled, plug it in over here. So if this is true, we cannot split the stack, so we're going to disable the button. And if this is false, then we can split it. So we're going to enable the button and plug everything in. And then we want to connect all of these amount buttons to this branch. So the button all, the button decrement, increment, and for the input text box, link them all up to this branch, and that should be good. So we have this stuff set up, and now we want to take care of the player inventory widget. So let's go to our inventory widget, player inventory, and in the graph we're going to create some new events. So let's start with one to create the item menu. So let's create a new custom event, and we're going to call this create item menu. So the first thing, let's do a create widget. So I'm going to leave a little bit of room in here, but we're going to get back to that later. So we're going to create our item menu widget, and that's inventory item menu. And then we want to plug in our player inventory. So that's a reference to ourselves. And for our inventory slot, we actually want to drag it on top of the event so we can pass it on. And for the owning player, we can simply get the owning player, and that will return our player controller. So that should be good to go. Then we want to make sure the item menu is valid. So let's drag off here, is valid, and it's actually successfully created. Then for the item menu, let's promote it to a variable. So promote to variable, and that's our widget blueprint inventory item menu. So we have it stored and we can work with it later. Then we want to add it to the viewport. So let's drag off here again and type add to viewport. Connect it up over here as well. Then we're going to get the mouse position on viewport. So let's drag off here, get mouse position on viewport. And for this, we can drag off the widget again, and then set the position in viewport. Plug it in over here, plug the return value in as the position, and you can remove the DPI scale. That should be good to go. So this is the create item menu, and then we want an event to close it as well. So let's create a custom event and call it close item menu. So in here, we simply want to check if we actually have an item menu. So let's drag it in here and let's do is valid. And if it's valid, then we're going to remove it from parent. So drag off here again, remove from parent, and make sure that we also clear the variable that we created. So we're going to drag in our inventory item menu and simply clear it. So that should be good. Now, if we create an item menu, we want to call our close item menu first. So we're going to add a call in between here. And then we're also going to go to our event destruct. And in here, we also want to call our close item menu. So it will automatically close if we close the entire inventory. Okay, so those events are good to go as well. Now we want to go back into the inventory item menu. And in here, we need to add an onClicked event for the close button. So let's go to button close, add an onClicked event, and we're simply going to drag in our player inventory and call the close item menu. Plug it in over here. And let's copy these two nodes and go back to our update split stack, because in here we need to close the item menu so we can get rid of the comment. So if the item amount is 0, then we're going to close our item menu as well. So plug this into the true bin and that should be good to go. There we go. And now what we want to do is go to the inventory slot and change our OnMouseButtonDown event. So let me grab my notes quickly. And let's open up our inventory slot, go to the graph. So we have our mouse event OnMouseButtonDown. And in here, we're going to make sure that our item menu appears if we are right clicking. And we're also going to make sure that if we have an item menu up, we cannot drag items around in the inventory. So first we're going to add a pin to this end node. And we want to grab our player inventory in here. And from the player inventory, we're going to get our inventory item menu. So get inventory item menu. And if this is valid, so let's drag off here, do is valid, but this time we're going to use the function, the green one. So we can plug it into the condition, but first we want to flip it around. So let's get a not boolean. Plug it in here. So this will make sure we cannot drag items if we have an inventory item menu open. Then we want to go to our mouse event, drag off here again, and we want to get the IsMouseButtonDown. And this time we want to check if it's the right mouse button. So let's look for right mouse button. And we can hook this up to a new branch. So this is the condition, and this goes into the false bin of the previous branch. So if it's not the left mouse button, we can check if it's the right one. And we want to make sure that if it's not the right mouse button, we're simply going to return. So add a return node, and for the return value, we're going to say unhandled. There we go. Then we're going to grab ourselves another branch, plug it in over here, and we want to make sure the item row name for this inventory slot is not empty. So we're going to say is not equal to, and simply type empty. So we cannot create an item menu for an empty slot. That doesn't make sense. So if this is true, then we want to create the actual item menu. So we can drag in our player inventory and we can create the item menu. So we need a reference to our inventory slot, and that's simply a reference to ourselves. So we can plug that in over here. And if this is false, then we want to close the item menu. So for example, if we already have an item menu open, if we right click on another slot and that's empty, we're going to close everything down. So in this case, we're simply going to call close item menu, plug it into the false bin, and then we can return again. And in this case, we want to say the event is handled. So we're going to drag off here and say handled. And this should be good to go as well. So I think we have the item menu pretty much set up, and all we need to do is make sure that our buttons actually do something. First, let's check out and see if it's actually working. So let's check it out. Let's open again. And now if we right click, our menu should appear. So that's good to go. So the input box is still a bit weird. We can have a look at that. So our increment and decrement button should work, and if we press the all button, that should work as well. And then that will disable the split stack button, so that works. So I think we have the setup over here done. If we right click on another empty spot, that will make the menu appear, so that's good. Our close button is working, so I think we are pretty much good to go. So let's have a little look at setting up the font over here. So then we need to go into the side of our inventory item menu, and that's our input box over here. So we want to the size a little bit bigger, so I'm going to make the font 20 and make sure we have the correct font selected over here. And to make sure that the color works, we should disable inherit, and I think that should make it look a little bit better. So there we go. Now the text actually matches the rest, and we can also type in values in here. So if I try to type something that's bigger than my stack size, it will clamp it to the maximum stack size, so that's working. So I think we are good to go in here. So in the next video, we're going to set up the actual functionality of the buttons and make sure that everything is working. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.